What if a single moment of cruelty could change everything? At 72, Maddie Parker had faced her share of hardships, but nothing prepared her for the humiliation she suffered in a sleek Manhattan cafe. A simple request for hot water and a warm towel was met with icy contempt from the owner, James Whitaker. His disdain turned to open hostility, and in an instant, scalding liquid and a berry tart were hurled at her, staining her clothes, burning her skin, and ruining the medication she desperately needed. As she struggled to steady herself, surrounded by silent onlookers, a voice cut through the tension. A voice she recognized. Johnny Depp had seen everything, and he wasn't about to let this injustice go unanswered. But could one act of kindness truly spark a revolution? Before we continue this story, let us know where you are watching from. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. At 72, Maddie Parker had walked Manhattan streets more times than she could remember. Yet on that crisp spring morning, the city air felt unusually sharp. Wrapped in a thin, faded jacket, she navigated the sidewalk with careful steps, arthritis in her hips and knees nagging at her every move. Despite the discomfort, she carried herself with quiet dignity, head held high. Silver hair peeking from beneath a knitted cap she had made long ago. Maddie glanced at her watch, 12:45 p.m. She was on schedule for her afternoon medication, which she always took at precisely 1:00 p.m. The rules of her Addison's disease were unyielding. No late doses, no missed pills. Without them, her body could slip into dangerous territory. Spotting a gleaming new cafe at the ground floor of a modern glass tower, Maddie decided a warm drink would be the perfect companion to her pills. The cafe's interior felt cool and sophisticated. Muted earth tones, polished chrome fixtures, and plush seating where suited patrons tapped on laptops and conversed in hushed tones. A swirl of coffee aroma drifted from behind the counter, mingling with the faint smell of baked goods. Maddie quietly slipped into a round leather booth near the back. As she settled, a friendly young waitress approached, notebook in hand. "Welcome to Whitaker's," the waitress said brightly. "Can I get you something to drink?" Maddie smiled, relieved to be treated kindly. "Just a cup of hot water, please," she replied softly. "And maybe a small berry tart if you have it. Also, if it's not too much trouble, could I get a warm towel?" The waitress nodded. "Of course, Mom, coming right up." While she waited, Maddie carefully set out her pill bottle on the table. She allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Another day, another step toward keeping her condition under control. She gazed around the bustling cafe, inhaling the comforting scents. Perhaps this place would become a little sanctuary, she thought, if the staff kept up this welcoming attitude. But as Maddie's eyes drifted shut for just a second, a sudden clearing of a throat startled her. She looked up to see a tall, lean man standing by her table, shirt cuffs rolled precisely to his elbows. His expression was anything but friendly. "Ma'am," he said, voice tight, "we don't accommodate special requests here." Confused, Maddie blinked. "I'm sorry. An extra towel," he continued icily. "This isn't a spa." His name tag read James Whitaker, manager and owner. The same name emblazoned on the cafe sign outside. Maddie straightened her posture. "If it's a problem, I can do without it." He scoffed. "Let's just say our clientele doesn't appreciate unnecessary demands." A wave of unease swept over her. Yet she steadied herself, determined not to show fear. "I wasn't aware a simple towel was an unnecessary demand. I'm more than capable of paying for my orders, sir." His lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, you can pay, can you?" He scanned her from head to toe, making no attempt to hide his contempt. "Those clothes don't exactly scream high roller." Maddie inhaled slowly, forcing herself to remain calm. "I just need to take my medication, sir. Then I'll be on my way." "Medication?" He let out a harsh laugh. "What's that supposed to mean? Is this some excuse?" She lifted the pill bottle slightly, though her hands trembled. "I have Addison's disease. It's critical I take these pills on time." "So you're sick?" "That's all we need. Someone scaring off customers with her ailments." His words came out cold. "We cater to professionals. You're in the wrong place, Grandma." Anger and hurt flared inside Maddie, but she pressed her lips together. Raising her voice would only escalate matters. "I'm a customer," she said evenly. "I've ordered a tart and a cup of water. I'm not asking for anything else." The owner's eyes flicked to her pill bottle, then to the tattered edges of her jacket. She could almost feel his disdain radiating toward her. Before she could brace herself, he snatched the tray from the waitress, who had just arrived with Maddie's order, and, with calculated malice, flicked his wrists. Scalding liquid arced through the air. Maddie gasped as hot water splashed across her arms and face. The berry tart followed, spinning off the plate and crashing in her favorite pink sweater, leaving a sticky smear of fruit filling. Pain burned her skin. Shock and humiliation clashed in her mind, rendering her speechless for a moment. A hush fell across the cafe, all eyes locked on the horrifying spectacle. "Oops," James Whitaker said, voice dripping with insincerity. "Hope you didn't mind a little spill." Maddie cradled her scalded arm, tears welling up as the sting set in. Her pill bottle had been drenched, the tablets potentially ruined, a costly blow to both her health and her finances. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a raw, hoarse whisper came out. "Please, I think you need to leave." Whitaker interrupted cruelly. "Now." A wave of vertigo rolled through Maddie. She forced herself to stand, ignoring the agony in her limbs. She clutched her purse, stepping carefully around the pooling water on the floor. The young waitress looked on, horrified, but seemed paralyzed with uncertainty. Other patrons exchanged uneasy glances, some quietly turning away to avoid involvement. Staggering to the restroom, Maddie tried to control her breathing, pressed a trembling hand to her chest, and fought to quell the dizziness from rising adrenaline. Behind her, the cafe murmured with hushed shock and distant embarrassment. As she disappeared into the restroom, no one dared to intervene, except, unbeknownst to Maddie, one very recognizable face watching from the corner, quietly rising to follow the scene. Inside the restroom, Maddie rested against the sink, heart hammering in her chest. Her reflection in the spotless mirror revealed the evidence of Whitaker's cruelty, splatters of water across her sweater, bright berry stains, and redness on her cheeks from the scalding liquid. She dabbed her face and arms gingerly with a paper towel, wincing at each throb of pain. Worst of all, her pill bottle was in ruins. She held it up. The label was peeling away, and the once solid tablets had turned into mush, half dissolved by the hot water. A wave of helplessness threatened to overtake her. Replacing these pills would cost money she couldn't afford to waste, and more importantly, she needed them promptly to prevent a medical crisis. Trying to steel herself, Maddie splashed cool water on her face, careful to avoid the reddened areas, and swallowed hard. She had spent a lifetime facing prejudice and hardship, from job discrimination to snide remarks on the subway. Yet rarely had anyone dared to literally assault her in public for daring to exist in the wrong place. She was too exhausted, too stunned, to muster the righteous anger she knew was buried somewhere beneath her shock. Drawing a steadying breath, she told herself, one step at a time. She still had a single intact pill she'd salvaged before leaving the booth. After a shaky attempt, she managed to swallow it dry, then forced herself to stand upright. She didn't want to cower inside the restroom, but the idea of returning to that poisonous cafe atmosphere made her stomach churn. At last, she opened the bathroom door. The corridor leading back to the dining area was short, but it felt like a mile. The hushed hum of conversation reached her ears. Glass clinked on marble countertops, and faint jazz music seemed obscenely cheery under the circumstances. Maddie inched toward an empty booth at the far end of the cafe, one that wasn't directly under the harsh overhead lights. Her damp sweater clung uncomfortably, a grim reminder of her humiliation. She slid into the seat, hugging herself against the chill of the air conditioning. The hush of onlookers, while less intense, was still palpable in the occasional glance cast her way. She couldn't leave yet, The storm clouds outside had opened to a steady rainfall, and her wobbly legs refused to carry her through another harsh environment. She considered calling someone, her grandson Michael, perhaps, but hesitated. He had school and responsibilities, and she hated to burden him with her troubles. A new waitress passed by, older than the first, and gave Maddie a cautious look. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Maddie inhaled, trying to keep her voice steady. "If I could just have a cup of hot water to replace the one that was spilled, I'd appreciate it. I'll pay for it, of course." The waitress glanced over her shoulder, as though fearful that Whitaker might be lurking. She leaned in quietly. "I'm so sorry for what happened. I'll bring you some hot water, no charge. Anything else you need?" Before Maddie could reply, a familiar, cutting voice sliced through the brief kindness. "Is there a problem here?" James Whitaker, still bristling with authority, strode up to the table. The waitress backed away, startled. Maddie felt her pulse spike, but she forced herself to meet Whitaker's glare head-on. "I'm not causing a scene. I only asked for hot water. I already paid for my tart, which you threw at me." He let out a sharp exhale of contempt. "You know, you're on very thin ice," he spat. "I told you to leave, yet here you are, still occupying a table. I don't want my business associated with whatever you're dealing with." Maddie felt tears threaten again, this time from anger. "So, I deserve to be scalded and thrown out because you don't like how I look? Because I have a medical condition? I have every right to be here. You deserve exactly what I give you," he snarled, leaning in close enough that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Your presence is costing me real customers. Look around." It was true a few people had left, evidently uncomfortable with the confrontation. Others buried themselves in their phones, avoiding eye contact. A numbing sense of isolation clutched at Maddie's chest. The more humiliating the moment, the less anyone seemed willing to intervene. A hush settled again as two burly employees approached from behind Whitaker, likely the same servers who had watched earlier. "Get her out," Whitaker commanded, jabbing a thumb in Maddie's direction. "I'm tired of looking at her." One server hesitated. "Sir, are you sure?" "She hasn't actually." Whitaker swung around. "Did I stutter?" Maddie's heart pounded. She edged out of the booth, anxious to avoid another physical altercation. But her foot snagged on a chair leg. In an instant, she was off balance, toppling onto the polished floor. A sharp pain shot through her hip as she landed. Her purse spilled open, and the pill fragments that remained tumbled across the tile. A muted gasp rippled through the cafe. The servers stared in stunned silence. Even Whitaker looked momentarily shocked, though he recovered quickly, stepping forward with a twisted sneer. "You see what kind of trouble you're causing?" he hissed, looking ready to push her further if she dared to stand. Then a calm, measured voice spoke from behind them. "That's quite enough." Maddie blinked, turning her gaze upward. She recognized the man instantly. Dark hair, distinct cheekbones, a familiar face from countless movie posters. Johnny Depp. Her breath hitched. Why was he here? And why was he intervening on her behalf? "That's enough," Depp repeated, stepping forward in a leather jacket and broad-brimmed hat. He knelt beside Maddie, gently offering his hand. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Maddie, shaken, managed a small nod. She accepted his help, and he eased her to her feet. A wave of dizzy relief washed over her. Someone was finally helping. "Who do you think you are?" Whitaker snapped, eyeing Depp with the hostility of a cornered animal. Depp's voice held quiet steel. "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that I've just witnessed you harassing and assaulting this woman. People like you don't deserve the privilege of running a public establishment." Whitaker's mouth opened, but no words came. The entire cafe seemed to hold its breath, uncertain how to process this unforeseen champion, and the momentum was shifting in Maddie's favor. "Come on," Depp told Maddie gently, ignoring Whitaker's smoldering glare. "Let's get you somewhere safe." With Depp's steady support, Maddie felt the final vestiges of her terror subside. She cast one last look at Whitaker, whose face was now ashen with alarm, and allowed her unexpected rescuer to guide her out of the cafe's toxic air and into the New York City drizzle. Outside, the sky had fully opened into a gentle rain, though it felt cleansing compared to the suffocating atmosphere Maddie had just escaped. Johnny Depp guided her under the cafe's awning, away from the glass doors. Around them, a few curious pedestrians paused, phones at the ready. "I'm Johnny," he said simply, though Maddie hardly needed the introduction. "Let's get you warm. Would you like something to drink?" Maddie's voice trembled. "Just hot tea, maybe." Without another word, Depp dashed to the neighboring kiosk, returning with a steaming paper cup. He pressed it into Maddie's hands. "Here, sip slowly." She felt the warmth radiate through her chilled fingers. Her shoulders trembled from a mix of adrenaline and cold. "Thank you," she managed quietly. He nodded. "I saw everything that happened in there." A flicker of anger crossed his features. That man crossed a line. Maddie inhaled shakily, tears threatening. "It's not the first time I've faced prejudice. Usually I can shrug it off. But today her voice caught. He ruined my medication." Depp's expression turned concerned. "Medication?" She explained Addison's disease in halting sentences, how missing a dose could trigger severe complications, how the pills were expensive, and how she'd meticulously scheduled each one. Tucking damp strands of hair behind her ear, she added, "I have enough for the next week, but the pills he ruined were the midday dose. I swallowed the last salvageable one in the restroom." He exhaled. "That's unbelievable and extremely dangerous." Checking over his shoulder, he noticed a small crowd forming, cameras peeking around corners. He lowered his voice. "Let's move away from the entrance." With a subtle wave to keep gawkers at bay, Depp led Maddie a few steps down the sidewalk, where a black SUV idled. Two men in suits, clearly security, were stepping out, scanning the environment. One approached, speaking quietly. Depp nodded, then turned back to Maddie. "It's only going to get more chaotic now that people realize what's going on. Would you mind if I share what happened on my social media? People need to know." She hesitated, the prospect of public attention both daunting and exhilarating. "I suppose I don't want him to keep doing this to others." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "Then let's shine some light on it." Maddie watched, astonished, as he pulled out his phone and began a live broadcast on a popular platform. The drizzle hadn't stopped, so raindrops occasionally spattered the screen. But Depp pressed on, his voice carrying clarity and conviction. "Hey, everyone," he began, holding the phone at arm's length. "I'm here in New York, outside Whitaker's Cafe. I just witnessed an appalling incident. An elderly woman was harassed and physically assaulted by the owner." He glanced at Maddie with a soft nod of encouragement. "Her name is Maddie Parker, and she was simply trying to have a cup of tea and take her essential medication." Maddie's cheeks flushed at the mention of her name, but she stood firm. The small crowd around them grew, passers-by drawn by the presence of a movie star broadcasting live. Depp recounted the scene in succinct, powerful terms, describing the scalding water, the tirade of insults, and the disregard for Maddie's medical condition. Halfway through, they were joined by a local news reporter who had recognized Depp and scrambled over with a microphone. Sensing an even bigger audience, he waved her in to document Maddie's plight. The reporter, wide-eyed with shock, asked Maddie directly, "How are you feeling right now? And what do you want to see happen?" Her voice quivered, but she spoke from the heart. "I'm hurt, physically and emotionally. I want him held accountable. No one deserves this kind of treatment. And I hope that by speaking out, others who face cruelty can realize they're not alone." Within minutes, the story began to flood social media. Cameras clicked in a frenzy. James Whitaker was spotted at the cafe door, mouth agape, clearly aware that the tide of public opinion was turning fast. A paparazzo elbowed closer, jostling Maddie. Depp's security intervened, guiding her toward the SUV. "We can't stay here," he murmured, noticing how the scene was escalating. "Let's get you out of the rain and somewhere safe." Maddie followed, her mind in a whirl. She'd expected an afternoon of quiet respite, not a press storm or the personal attention of a major celebrity. Yet here she was, climbing into a luxury vehicle while photographers snapped away. Once inside, the doors sealed the chaos outside. Depp's gaze remained gentle. "We'll drive you wherever you need." "Doctor's office?" "Home." Maddie pressed her trembling hands together. the leftover adrenaline still coursing through her. My home, if that's all right. My grandson. He might be worried if I don't return soon. The SUV pulled away from the curb, melding into Manhattan's traffic. As the city blurred by, Depp asked more about Addison's disease, empathy coloring his tone. He opened up about how he'd grown up watching family members work tough jobs, dealing with everyday prejudice and hardships. No one should endure that sort of behavior, he said, voice laced with conviction. Gradually, Maddie relaxed. The hum of the engine lulled her nerves. She found herself confiding in him about her pension, how tight money had been since she retired from her housekeeping job, and her unstoppable determination to remain independent. The idea of replacing the medication she'd lost weighed heavily on her mind. Don't worry about that, Depp said quietly, pulling out a checkbook. Please let me help cover the cost. She stiffened. That's very kind, Mr. Depp, but I can't. He shook his head. Yes, you can. And please call me Johnny. Writing a figure, he tore the check free and pressed it into her hand. No strings attached. Maddie, I can't fix what you went through, but I can spare you the expense. Tears of gratitude welled up, and she mumbled a soft thank you. He offered a comforting smile. Changing the topic to lighter things, a recent project of his, a new favorite cafe in Paris, which he said treated everyone kindly. Gradually, the tension in Maddie's shoulders eased, replaced by a warm glow of relief and unexpected hope. Soon, they arrived at Maddie's apartment building, a modest brick structure on the Lower East Side. The rain had lightened, leaving the streets damp and glimmering under city lights. Depp insisted on escorting her to the front stoop, ensuring she was safely inside. There on the stoop stood Michael, her lanky grandson, twirling keys and glancing impatiently at his phone. He double-took at the sight of his grandmother stepping out of a black SUV, accompanied by a Hollywood legend. His jaw dropped. Get on. And, are you? He couldn't even finish the question. Maddie mustered a shaky laugh. I'll explain everything, sweetheart. Let's get inside. Depp clasped both her hands. Take care, Maddie. I'll be following up to make sure the cafe owner faces consequences. And if there's anything else, he handed her a card. Don't hesitate to call. She squeezed his hand, feeling an indescribable mix of awe and gratitude. Thank you, Johnny. You've done more than enough already. He winked, climbed back into the SUV, and disappeared into Manhattan's bustling twilight. Meanwhile, Michael's barrage of questions tumbled out, but Maddie hushed him gently. Inside, she repeated, I'll tell you everything. Let's just breathe first. As the apartment door closed behind them, the day's events still danced through her mind, a swirl of pain, prejudice, and the remarkable kindness of a stranger who turned out to be one of the world's most famous actors. And in her chest, beneath the exhaustion, there flickered a small, steadfast flame of hope. Maddie's apartment was modest but cozy, mismatched furniture, family photos lining the walls, and crocheted blankets draped over every armchair. She let out a heavy sigh, setting her wet purse on a side table and beckoning Michael into the living room. The overhead light cast a warm glow, illuminating his anxious face. Gran, he blurted, what happened? You're soaking wet, you look exhausted, and was that really Johnny Depp outside? She sank into her favorite armchair, wincing at the lingering throb in her hip. It's a long story, Michael. It started with me walking into a new cafe. She told the tale in measured detail. The hostility from James Whittaker, the scalding water, her ruined medication, and the sudden intervention by a figure she recognized from the big screen. Michael listened, mouth agape, occasionally exclaiming in anger or disbelief. His fists clenched when Maddie described how Whittaker humiliated her. That's insane, he seethed. You should be arrested, Gran. You could press charges. Maddie rubbed her temples. That might happen yet. Johnny said he'd make sure the authorities and the media heard about it. A weary shrug followed. But I won't hold my breath. Sometimes people like Whittaker slip through the cracks. Michael hopped to his feet, the cushions bouncing. No, we can't let that guy get away with it. Not this time. He grabbed his phone. Check social media. Look, hashtag Whittaker's Cafe is trending. There's a video of the incident from someone's phone. Did you see all those folks recording? And Johnny Depp's statement on his own live stream has, like, millions of views already. Maddie's heart skipped. She felt a twinge of discomfort at being a public spectacle. My goodness, she murmured. I'm not used to all this attention. Michael scrolled further. People are outraged, Gran. They're calling for boycotts. Some are even heading down there to protest. The cafe's rating has plummeted. A flicker of excitement crossed his face. This could lead to real consequences for that jerk. She exhaled, a knot unraveling inside her chest. I never wanted to be at the center of controversy. But if it protects others from his bigotry, maybe some good can come of it. Michael looked up from his phone, eyes shining with admiration. You're so strong, Gran. I'm sorry you had to deal with that alone. A tired smile crossed her face. I managed, she said quietly, but she clutched her hip. Still, I might need a doctor's visit. My side took a hit when I fell, and I need more medication. Her grandson's features turned serious. Let's get you comfortable first, okay? He dashed to the kitchenette, returning with a glass of water. We'll call your doctor. We'll figure it out. Maddie nodded, sipping slowly. She debated mentioning Depp's check. He had insisted she accept it, but fear and pride warred in her gut. She wasn't sure how Michael would react. If she told him about the money, would he see it as a chance to solve their financial worries? She didn't want to cheapen Depp's act of kindness into a payday or cause tension. So, for now, she tucked the memory of that moment away, safe in her mind. As Michael helped her change out of her stained sweater, the local news blared from the TV. A reporter stood outside Whitaker's cafe, describing how furious New Yorkers had begun gathering. Clips of Johnny Depp, with a protective hand on Maddie's shoulder, flashed across the screen. A spokesperson from the cafe's PR team appeared, reading a stiff apology. We regret any misunderstanding. Our valued patron experienced an unfortunate mishap. Maddie felt her blood pressure spike. An unfortunate mishap, she repeated, lips pressed thin. She rubbed the faint pink patches on her arm where the water had burned her. They're painting it like an accident. Michael shook his head, disgusted. They can spin it all they want. The whole internet's on your side, Gran. People can see the truth from the phone footage. He turned off the TV, evidently unwilling to let half-baked corporate statements overshadow reality. They spent the next hour online, reading supportive messages from strangers who had seen the clips. Offers of help poured in, from covering her medical bills to delivering groceries so she wouldn't have to venture out until she recovered. Maddie felt torn between gratitude and a sense of invasion. Strangers were discussing her life and finances publicly now. Look at this, Michael said, leaning over the phone. Someone started a fundraiser to cover your medical expenses. It's already got hundreds of donations. Maddie's eyes widened. But I never asked for that. I don't want people's pity money. It's not pity, Michael insisted softly. Folks just want to do something good. You went through something awful. They're outraged on your behalf. With a sigh, she nodded. We'll see. One step at a time. Later that evening, as the adrenaline drained and the initial flurry of phone calls ended, Maddie sank back into her armchair, exhaustion crashing over her. Mithol brevet tamomiletea brought it to her with a gentle pat on her shoulder. The day's storm had subsided, city lights reflecting off puddles in a shimmering glow. You should rest, he murmured. We can see the doctor tomorrow morning. I'll come with you. Maddie gave him a tired smile. Thank you, sweetheart. I appreciate everything you're doing. As he retreated to the small spare room where he sometimes stayed over, Maddie felt an ache in her bones. She retrieved the check from her purse, carefully folding it in half. Maybe she should deposit it, just enough to cover medication. But the sum on that slip of paper was more than she'd ever seen at once. She whispered a silent prayer of thanks and also concern. She didn't want to use it frivolously. Her mind drifted back to the kindness in Johnny Depp's eyes when he knelt by her on the cafe floor. How easily he could have ignored the scene. Yet he'd chosen to intervene, to risk an altercation with the owner on her behalf. She thought of James Whitaker's sneer, of the scorching water, and felt a pang of renewed anger. But overshadowing that was a sense of cautious optimism. Maybe this outcry would force him to face real consequences. Switching off the lamp, she let the hush of the night envelop her. The day had stretched her emotions to their limits, from helpless fury to unexpected compassion. As she dozed off, the distant hum of traffic mingled with her grandson's soft breathing in the next room. Life would never be the same after today, but maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Dawn brought a subdued Manhattan glow, light filtering through gray clouds. Maddie awoke stiff and sore, her hip reminding her of yesterday's fall. Still, she forced herself out of bed, guided by the unwavering rule of Addison's disease. Take her pills on time. In the kitchenette, she found Michael already up, flipping through channels on the small television. When he caught sight of her, he hopped off the stool. "Gran, you okay? You slept all right." "As well as I could," she replied, gingerly settling at the table. She fished a fresh pill bottle from her purse, thankfully her next set of medication, and swallowed one tablet with water. "Time for me to call the doctor." Michael nodded, checking his phone. "They said they could squeeze you in this afternoon for a quick examination. You might get some pain relief for your hip, too." Just then, the TV's volume rose as a newscaster exclaimed. In an update to yesterday's breaking story, both turned to watch. Footage from Whitaker's cafe played again, capturing the moment of the spilled water and the subsequent confrontation. Then, an image of Johnny Depp with a determined expression, stating his condemnation of the owner's actions. This morning, James Whitaker issued a formal statement. The reporter continued. He claims the incident was misrepresented, but admits he deeply regrets the misunderstanding. Legal experts suggest Maddie Parker, the elderly woman involved, could have grounds for a civil lawsuit. Maddie's brow furrowed. She wasn't sure she wanted to entangle herself in a lengthy legal battle. She'd always lived quietly, minding her own affairs. Yet the avalanche of attention pressed her to consider the bigger picture. This wasn't just about her. How many others might have faced Whitaker's bigotry in silence? Her phone buzzed, a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Maddie Parker?" asked a woman's voice, crisp but friendly. "This is Karen Avery. I'm a journalist at a national news network. We'd love to have you speak on air about your experience. It could help raise awareness on discrimination issues." Maddie's stomach clenched. "Oh, I'm not sure. I'm just trying to recover. I don't know if I'm the right person to talk about." "Please consider it," Karen pressed gently. "Your story has captured hearts nationwide. You could help make real change." Maddie thanked her politely and hung up, conflicted. Michael watched expectantly. "What did they say?" She sighed, setting the phone aside. "They want me on TV. Goodness gracious, me on national television." Michael grinned. "You'd be great, Gran. Besides, if it helps others and ensures Whitaker's cafe changes or shuts down, it's worth it, right?" Still uncertain, she nodded. "Let me think about it." They spent the morning quietly. Michael tidied up, then they both headed to the doctor. True to his word, the physician updated Maddie's prescription, lectured her about stress management, and gave her a mild pain reliever for her hip. The nurse recognized her from the news coverage, offering warm smiles of support. Back home, to her surprise, they found an envelope taped to the apartment door. Inside, it was a handwritten apology from James Whitaker himself, stilted and formal. A short sentence read, "I hope you can forgive my lapse in judgment." Enclosed was a money order. Maddie's jaw tightened. She didn't want hush money. She wanted sincere accountability. By afternoon, her phone was buzzing again, various local nonprofits hoping to stand with her. The city's mayor tweeted solidarity, calling for an end to harmful biases that plague our communities. The avalanche was unstoppable now. Maddie realized she was at a crossroads. Retreat quietly or stand up, not just for herself, but for others who'd endured similar humiliations. At Michael's gentle urging, she called Karen Avery back and agreed to a brief interview. Word spread quickly, and arrangements were made for a small camera crew to visit her apartment that evening. Nervousness fluttered in her stomach, but she resolved to speak her truth. As the camera lights glared in her living room, Maddie sat perched on her sofa, hands clasped. Karen Avery guided the interview with warm professionalism. Maddie recounted the cafe incident, describing the fear, the pain, and the sense of isolation. She then expressed deep gratitude for the bystander intervention, specifically Johnny Depp's refusal to look away. It wasn't about celebrity, Maddie said, voice quavering but resolute. It was about decency. All he did was what any decent person should do. Step in when someone's being hurt. Karen nodded. What message would you like to send to viewers, Mrs. Parker? Maddie took a breath, glancing at Michael for reassurance. I want people to understand that discrimination is never a misunderstanding. It's real, it's hurtful, and it doesn't vanish unless we confront it. We should all be kinder. And when we see something wrong, we can't just stand by. The interview ended with Karen asking about Maddie's plans regarding legal action. Maddie responded quietly, I'm still considering all my options, but I'll say this. No one else should go through this, whether they're black, elderly, or simply deemed not good enough. After the interview, Karen and her camera crew packed up, leaving Maddie with an unsteady pulse and the conviction she'd done the right thing. That same evening, she received a call from an attorney offering pro bono representation if she wished to sue. The swirl of possibilities was dizzying. She'd never imagined retirement would involve a potential court case or national interviews. Before bed, she scrolled through countless supportive messages on social media. One from Johnny Depp read, Proud to see Maddie Parker sharing her story. True courage. Let's stand together against injustice. Her eyes misted at the genuine outpouring of solidarity from strangers worldwide. Sitting quietly in her living room, lights dimmed, she once again remembered the burning water on her arms, the hateful sneer on Whitaker's face. She also recalled the warmth of a stranger's voice stepping in to shield her. Both the cruelty and compassion coexisted as reminders of what humans are capable of, both the vicious and the valiant. Maddie clasped her hands, breathing in and out as her world felt irrevocably altered. Regardless of how everything else played out, whether she pursued a lawsuit or the cafe closed, or Whitaker faced charges, she found herself possessed of an undeniable purpose, to show that bigotry could be battled by shining a light upon it. And in that purpose, she knew she wasn't alone. The aftermath of Maddie Parker's encounter at Whitaker's cafe rippled across the city, the country, and beyond. News outlets covered the story extensively, fueled by Johnny Depp's viral livestream and the public's collective outrage. James Whitaker faced legal scrutiny, a firestorm of condemnation, and a customer boycott that left his once thriving business on shaky ground. Meanwhile, Maddie found her quiet life transformed overnight. She juggled medical appointments, media requests, and heartfelt messages from people she'd never met. Strangers thanked her for speaking out, sharing stories of their own experiences with discrimination. Though it felt surreal, she embraced the chance to use her voice. Her reluctant step into the spotlight became an opportunity to champion respect and empathy for all. With each passing day, the physical bruises healed. The red burns from the scalding water faded, leaving only faint marks on her skin. But the emotional scars would take longer to mend. Guided by her grandson Michael's support and buoyed by Johnny Depp's unwavering kindness, Maddie resolved to press forward. She pursued a formal complaint against Whitaker's establishment, not for revenge, but for accountability and for the possibility of real change. In the end, her story became a testament to the power of compassion. A single spark of decency, someone deciding to stand up rather than stand by, had ignited a larger flame. People across diverse backgrounds recognized themselves in Maddie's struggle, rallying together in solidarity. And though one cafe owner's prejudice had momentarily torn her down, it ultimately highlighted something greater, that in a world too often tainted by cruelty, empathy can still prevail, and a quiet voice, when finally heard, can echo farther than anyone ever imagined.